Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the No Nay Never podcast. I'll be your host this week, George Poole. Natalie's away swanning in Las Vegas. So I'm not sure who's got the better task here, whether it's me reflecting on a 5-1 defeat by Manchester City or Natalie having the time of her life in Las Vegas. I'm sure, Dave, you would rather be here with me than abroad. We've got the Aston Villa game to look forward to. We've got another Erling Haaland goal against Burnley to reflect on. So welcome, Dave. How are you feeling? And would you rather be here or in Las Vegas? That's the question.
I'd rather be here. I'm not a very good flyer.
Oh, good. If that's the only reason, it's the reason I'll take. So Dave's not such a good flyer and would rather be here with us this week on a No Nay Never podcast. Well, Dave, before we go into Aston Villa, I think it's probably wise that we reflect on Manchester City. It wasn't the result we were hoping for, but probably the one we were expecting. I've been to the Etihad plenty of times over the last few years, but I decided as of that cup game a couple of years ago, never again. Sometimes with these pledges, you reflect and think, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. But honestly, sitting here, I'm really glad I didn't go. Dave, did you go to the Etihad and did you watch it at home? And how was it?
I didn't go. I'd warned everyone last week in terms of the past history, what was going on. So I kind of had an inkling with that. So I didn't go to the Etihad. But yeah, it was one of those where we had hope in the first half. We did reasonably well. Got the equalising goal, and there was hope at half time. But yeah, it went sadly downhill from there, didn't it? Unfortunately.
It did, and I can't remember the exact stat, but when I was watching Match of the Day, I think they said over the last 16 or so games between us and Manchester City, the aggregate score was possibly 52-3, which did check out. And yeah, after watching us at the Etihad many times, I'm wholly unsurprised. But you're right. I think there was a lot of positives to take from the first half in particular. You're heading into half time, having, equalised through that man again, Jadon Anthony. Perhaps just a word on Anthony's start to the season. It seems like sometimes in a season, you just need somebody to strike gold, to come up with the goal every now and again. And especially with our system where you've not really got a goal scoring striker, let's say. Let's be generous. Last season, probably the same as well. People looked at that Parker team and said, well, at Fulham, he had Mitrovic. At Bournemouth, he had Solanke. How's he going to get Burnley up without an out-and-out 20-goal-a-season striker? Up pops Josh Brownhill. It seems, Dave, that this year, that man is Jadon Anthony.
Yeah, he did well back end of last season. He seems to be on a bit of a golden streak. I think it's like something like, is it 8 goals in 12 games, something like that? So, yeah, he's the player who seems to have the golden touch, and let's hope that can continue.
Yeah, he's a really exciting player at the moment because he's stepped up to the Premier League in a way that probably he had a few doubters. At the start of the season, I think he'd had his chance with Bournemouth before at that level. Obviously, he'd been to Leeds for a year on loan. Had a fantastic season with us last year, but perhaps there was a few words before the start of the season, people saying, do we need to upgrade that position? We brought in new signings, and you think, is Anthony going to get as much of a go this year? But so far, so good, I think. And it's just unfortunate this latest goal had to come in a drubbing. I think it's fair that we look at the second half, Dave. We went into half time feeling confident, feeling like, you know what? I actually really enjoyed that. And I think after a slow start, which we've probably made our trademark this season somewhat, after a slow start, I thought we really grew into the game. And at half time, you're sitting there and thinking we've really held our own. But in that second, it all just seemed to unravel after that second goal, didn't it?
Well, it did. And the 2 late goals as well put a sort of an unfair reflection on the game. It wasn't really it didn't feel like a 5-1 defeat. Obviously, that's what it ended up being at the end. But yeah, I think once that third goal went in, that was it was going to be uphill from there. And it was just the 2 late goals were just the icing on the cake for City. And we just come away really disappointed, thinking that we had a chance in that second half and couldn't quite keep it up for the full 90 minutes. We know in the Premier League, you've got to do that. You've got to keep it up for 90, 95, 100 minutes, don't you, to get those results, particularly at places like Manchester City.
Yeah, we've seen it over the last few weeks, haven't we? With Liverpool doing it to us, United with a last-minute penalty. If only Bruno Fernandes had taken a penalty against us like he did the other day for United, we can only wish. But against City, you end the game, it's 5-1. And the thing that really sticks to me and really gripes me is that you sort of armchair football fan up and down the country, or your pundit who's not interested in watching Burnley, will look at the results sheet, say, yeah, 5-1, that tallies. Burnley aren't really competitive when it comes to, a Manchester City. And it's just really annoying because at half time I thought we'd really held our own, and then you go on match of the day and you watch them and they're saying like, oh yeah, well, they hung in for 60 minutes. And even though that's probably a fair assessment, I do think sometimes this season we're not getting enough credit for the performances we're putting in. Is that just me, or do you agree? I think, sometimes people look at the league table. We've had a tough start. There's been a few last minute winners, and it doesn't necessarily tell the tale of how well we've started.
Yeah, I think we should have had another couple of points. I mean, the real disappointment conceding those 2 late penalties, obviously at Old Trafford and the home game against Liverpool, where we should have got something out of, well, perhaps both of those games, certainly one of them. And that at this stage of the season, even a point or two can make a big difference. So we need to pull that behind us. We can't dwell on that too much, and obviously look forward to another tricky away trip to Aston Villa. But it's an opportunity to get a result and try and turn things around.
It is, and I think on that note, we'll start looking ahead to Aston Villa, because Manchester City away is one of those fixtures which, you look at the fixture list at the start of the season, and you think, right, let's get past that, and that's very much the case again this time. We've touched on the Liverpool, the United games recently, where okay, we've done fantastically well to put ourselves into a position. Same with City, but realistically, it's going to be the games against the teams that are quote unquote around us in the table that are going to dictate our season. Now, ahead of this season, I probably wouldn't have put Aston Villa in that bracket. But now, sitting on the 2nd of October when we're recording this, all of a sudden, Aston Villa have had a tough start to the season. And this feels like a game which we can almost sink our teeth into. We can get our season up and running. I've seen people saying Burnley's season starts now, and it's hard to dispute that. It's been a tough start points-wise, and now with Aston Villa away, it feels like we can really get going. So, Dave, just introduce this fixture to us. It's 2:00 on Sunday, right? Aston Villa away at Villa Park.
Yeah, and it's going to be broadcast live on Sky Sports. If you've got Sky Sports, it's on Sky Sports Plus, so you can catch it on there if it's broadcast in the UK, and obviously broadcast around the world. We've got lots of No Nay Never listeners all around the world who are able to watch our games live as well. But I do have some opening stats for you. Burnley fans haven't seen too many away wins at Villa Park over the years. In fact, in the post-war era, we've managed just 5 away wins in 34 attempts. Those victories were in 1950, 1962 and 1967. They were all in the old First Division. Then in 1973 in the old Second Division. And we've managed just 1 win in 6 attempts in Premier League meetings since 2010, as well as a defeat in a 4th-round League Cup tie at Villa Park after extra time. That was also in later 2010. However, as well as 1 solitary Premier League victory, more about that later, we did string together 3 successive draws in the Premier League at Villa Park between 2019 and 2022. So that does at least give us some hope ahead of this Sunday's game. Speaking for myself, I'm still recovering from the 5-2 defeat at Villa Park from February 2010. That was, of course, during Burnley's first season in the Premier League, and we can only hope that we defend a little bit better than we did that day for this weekend's match.
You'd hope so, wouldn't you? It's not been our happiest of hunting grounds in recent time. I remember, that game in the first Premier League season, and it seemed like at that point, every away game we went to, you're really up against it. I remember we started that season so well at home, and obviously we had that really good home record for a few months. But then when the tide changed, and then you're going away to these teams, and you remember that Aston Villa team back then, they had the likes of Gabby Agbonlahor, Ashley Young. I think they had a fantastic team that was challenging for Europe at the time. And you looked at our side, and they were grafters, and they worked hard for each other, but that quality wasn't there. I saw the other day that actually Stephen Fletcher announced his retirement yesterday, didn't he? I think one of my most fondly remembered players from back in that Premier League season. But we have had happier outings, Dave, and I know you're about to tell us about a fixture where we did get on the right hand side of the result, and this was actually a game that I attended myself when I was, I must have been 14, and to this day, honestly, it's one of my favourite outings that I've ever had on a away day. It was a really enjoyable performance. So, Dave, give us the headline highlights and the highlight match of this week.
Headline highlights is our way of bringing a past Premier League match against this weekend's opponents into focus, using some carefully collated newspaper articles, which I've been able to research. The 2014-15 season ended with Burnley being relegated straight back to the Championship, but not before we rounded off the campaign with a narrow 1-0 away victory. Star striker Danny Ings had run down his contract. It was no secret to be on his way at the end of the season, and obviously to Liverpool in the end. And that was, it needed a tribunal to rule on the amount we would receive. If it had gone abroad, I don't think we'd have got very much. We did quite well out of it in the end. But he did sign off in style and was the scorer of the only goal of this game on Sunday, 24th of May, 2015, just over 10 years ago, would you believe? So let's take a look at some of those headlines from this match. We've got a summary here, first of all, showing we're going to have headlines and reports from the Burnley Express this time, the Lancashire Telegraph, the Telegraph and Argus, and also the Guardian. So if we kick off, first of all, with the Burnley Express, they had the match, which was kind of their pull-out section, and the headline on the front of that was Ings signs off with another winner. And then going into the actual match report itself, we had Heaton proves he's worth call. Obviously, Tom Heaton, who later obviously went and joined Aston Villa, but he was pushing for an England place. Obviously, got his England cap in the end. So that was the main Burnley Express double-page match report. Had a bit more coverage in these years than some of the earlier years we've looked at. Looking on to the Lancashire Telegraph, they again referenced Danny Ings, and their headline was "Departing Danny has part Ing shot." Had lots of puns involving the word Ing, where Danny Ings was involved that season. I think he scored 11 goals for us, didn't he, in that campaign, in a relegation campaign. So to get into double figures was quite an achievement. And then we had the Telegraph and Argus. That was the headline, "Dyche out to help Clarets bounce back," and their brief match report. And then we also got a section in The Guardian as well from a much longer piece. But the top of it with the headline was, "Burnley bow out with a fight as Villa's focus shifts to FA Cup." So, yeah, a good win for Burnley, but it was a little bit, too little too late, wasn't it, in terms of that particular season?
It was, yeah. Thanks for bringing up those newspaper reports, Dave. It's great to see some local names, local reporters work from back then. Susan Geldard, Chris Borden, reported on obviously Burnley for many years. It's fashionable now to report on the Premier League, but it wasn't always the case, especially with little old Burnley. And I remember that day in particular it was very much felt at the time. I remember that this was Ings and Trippier's leaving dues. I noticed there in a couple of the reports that Dyche after the game was saying, well, who knows, he might stay in terms of Ings. That was very much a political answer, I'd suggest there, because we all knew for months, really. I seem to remember. And even at the end of the game, it was very much Ings and Trippier going over to the away end and giving their waves goodbye. And it was a really nice way for them to leave the club, wasn't it, Dave? It was unfortunate in that we couldn't fight until the final day of that season, but we really did give it a go. And Ings and Trippier, to their credit, stayed with us after that promotion campaign and gave us a fantastic season in the Premier League, albeit in a relegation. It ended in relegation. Oh, I'll just tell you to come off mute, Dave. It's 2025.
Yeah. They've gone on to better things, both of them. And they were fantastic for us when they were with us. But they've had fantastic careers. Obviously, Danny Ings had injuries, didn't he? When he was with us and also afterwards, perhaps curtailed his career a little bit. But Kieran Trippier went on and did fantastic things with Newcastle, with England. Yeah, he's been a fantastic player.
Yeah, and I think both of them left in quite a nice way. Obviously, Ings was leaving at the end of his contract, but as you referred to, we definitely did well out of the tribunal, and him going to Liverpool rather than a club abroad Trippier, remember, he'd signed that extra contract so that the club did get, I think it was 3.5 million in the end from Tottenham. So both of them did well for the club and then left with our best wishes. And every time they've returned since, really, they've had a warm reception, which I think is always quite indicative of how a player's left a club. I noticed at the weekend, actually, that Danny Ings was brought on for Sheffield United in place of Ben Mee, which is quite a funny quirk of fate. 2025, and you have those two, still plying their trade in the Championship, which I think is credit to both of them, especially in terms of the professionalism, because I'm absolutely certain that both of them have earned enough money from their careers to retire happily. In Ben Mee's case, I think he's destined for big things in the punditry world, but they're still there and trying it down in the second tier. So hats off to them, and we'll keep an eye on Danny and Ben Mee and all those former Clarets for as long as they continue playing. But back to this weekend's fixture away at Aston Villa. I don't remember that game in 2015. It was 1-0 in the end, wasn't it? And I can't remember there being any controversy, but you can't rule it out these days. With VAR, we've had to get used to it again this season, which has been a pity. It was actually quite nice, that Cardiff game last week, to have a game without VAR, for as poor as the performance was. But this weekend we'll have VAR, and Dave, tell us what we're in for in terms of this week's referee.
Well, Andrew Kitchen of Stanley and Durham will have the whistle this Sunday afternoon. Whisper it quietly, but Burnley are unbeaten in all of the previous 6 games involving the Clarets, which he's taken charge of, although this will be the first time he's refereed one of our Premier League games. That's because all those 6 previous games, 3 wins and 3 draws, were in the Championship last season. Among them were our 1-0 away win at Ewood Park in January of this year, when Zian Fleming scored the winner, and as well as the 0-0 draw in the league at Deepdale in February. That was the game that had to be halted due to the actions, or rather the words, of Mulitin Osmaic towards Hannibal, an incident that still awaits a resolution, well over 7 months later, although the situation was handled very well by the referee on the day. Meanwhile, our old friend, Michael Oliver, will be in charge of all the camera angles, as he's this weekend's video assistant referee.
Nice. I quite like Michael Oliver. I know he sometimes gets a rep just because I think he's a big name in the refereeing world, but I do actually quite like Michael Oliver, and I think it's, even though sometimes this isn't always the best indication, I think it's quite nice and indicative that he gets a lot of the big games, and especially these days with the scrutiny that referees are under, the fact that he keeps getting given these important games, I think, is telling of his standard as a referee. So I'm glad he's going to be overseeing things from the VAR booth. Dave, thanks again for providing your stats as ever, and please can you just tell us, for all the listeners and all the viewers, where can they find your stats if they aren't watching right now? Where can they find you?
Okay, so yeah, we've got some information for anyone who's interested in terms of my very own online Burnley FC scrapbook. It's basically compiled a lot of information from the Burnley Express, and now also lots of other newspaper sources as well. So there is a short link, which is bit.ly/BFC scrapbook, all in uppercase. And if you go to that, there's a couple of options, option 1, option 2. Option 1 allows you to search by season, or you can search by by date. But the option 2 is what we've been using for the preview show this season, which is another short link, bit.ly/BFC news finder, all in uppercase. And that allows you to pick a particular match, and it'll pull back not only the headlines to that match, but you can look at the scans as well. So you can go on there and you can click the links and you can go through and see all the scans and reminisce about all those old games.
Smashing. Thanks, Dave. Not that we want to reminisce on the Villa games too much every so often. Not the away fixtures anyway, from what you've told us tonight.
Well, that's the case for a lot of teams as well. But in terms of the main Burnley stats page as well, this is details up on screen for YouTube viewers. Again, there's a short link for this, bit.ly/Burnley Stats QL, and there's loads of stuff to go at there. So if anyone's interested, go on there, have a look, and see what's been compiled. There's match stuff, player stuff, highlights, all sorts of information.
Super. The most comprehensive scrapbook of Burnley FC anywhere in the world. That's right.
Hopefully.
Thank you, Dave. So, looking to Aston Villa this weekend, then, just on the good old feel of things, how do you feel about Aston Villa going into this weekend? We'll touch on Burnley, obviously, but how do you feel about Villa in particular?
As you said, they've had a bit of a shaky start to the season. Perhaps it wasn't too expected, but we've got to try and make the most of that. It might be a good time to play them. They might get into their stride later in the season. It's going to be a tougher game. But if we can play them now and try and get a positive result, I think it's never easy going. We always say it's never easy going away in the Premier League, whether you're playing at City, United, Liverpool, Arsenal, whoever, all the way down, the teams are capable of getting results. So, we've just got to go there with a positive frame of mind, take the positives in that first half at City and see whether we can and build on that and perhaps forget about what happened in the second 45 minutes. But we're mindful as well that we're going to need a 90-minute plus performance to get a positive result out of the game. You can't just play for 45 minutes. You need to do it for the full 90 minutes and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've definitely seen this season lots of positives in terms of, okay, the points haven't necessarily been forthcoming every so often, but the mindset of the players really seems to be in a good place. It seems like Parker's really got them playing for each other, which we didn't doubt, but there's a real togetherness and there's a real fight, which is what you definitely need in the Premier League. You know, things won't go your way often. More often than not, they'll definitely go the other way. But you've just got to stay together and keep fighting for each other. And I think, we saw at City that was evidence really again of this. We'd went 1-0 down. And when you go 1-0 down at a place like City, all of a sudden, the cliche is, well, you can rip up your pre-match tactics. That is the game plan gone. I remember when we used to go there under Dyche and you concede that first goal and there's a feeling of, because we were playing to keep a clean sheet and then maybe grab a goal somehow. But at the weekend, we took the game to City after they scored and we took it back to 1-1 by half time. So I do think there's definitely the mindset of the players is something to be really optimistic about this season. A live stat update on Aston Villa. They're currently winning 1-0 away at Feyenoord in the Europa League. They obviously won the first Europa League match 1-0 at home to Bologna. And then this weekend just gone, they beat Fulham 3-1 at home. Now, Dave, let me put it to you, and it comes from my brain working weird sometimes. I'm actually a lot more optimistic now that Villa have come into, quote unquote, a good run of form than if they'd have come into this game having not won in 8. What do you say to that?
I can see that to some extent. Yeah, it kind of takes the pressure off them a little bit, whereas, and that can work both ways. The pressure can work in a positive way, it can work in a negative way. But we have seen that before, haven't we, when teams have been on a really bad run, play Burnley and then get a result. So if they have had results, then that might play into our favour. I guess that's where you're coming from on that. But at the end of the day, it's two teams facing up 11 against 11 on Sunday afternoon. The fact that they've played midweek, playing a European game, that might be beneficial for us. I think it can be difficult, can't it? When we saw when we were playing our European games, it did impact us the first half of that season, not just while we're in the competition, but also afterwards as well, because it can take its toll. So we'll see. They've obviously got some really good players, but it's a tough game. I've said before, all the away games in the Premier League are, and if we can get any positive results away from home, then they're always a bonus.
Yeah, they are, and that's absolutely right. That's where I'm coming from. I'm thinking in my head, if we'd have come into this game and they'd not won in 6, let's say, and you've got to have a gimme match somewhere, you've got to get that point, you've got to get them 3 points off someone, and it always tends to be us. We saw early this season, United, they'd been on that awful run. They lost to Grimsby. Oh my word, wouldn't you love to play United now? And I was thinking, no, because there's absolutely no way that Manchester United lose to Grimsby and Burnley in the same week. That does not happen. And guess what? It didn't happen. So no, I'm quite optimistic the fact that Villa have won a couple of games. They've probably relieved that pressure from themselves, because I think that means they could throw in a performance again on Sunday. Not unlike the ones we saw earlier in the season where they were really struggling. So I'm optimistic for this game, but as you did say, Villa have some fantastic players. We can't overlook what they've done in recent years under Unai Emery. Are there any players in particular that you're looking at this team and thinking we really need to keep an eye on them? I think one for me is Emi Buendia. He was sort of the forgotten man at Villa. Was sent out on loan to Bayern Leverkusen last year. But he's obviously come back from his injuries. He scored again tonight, actually, in the game away at Feyenoord, and scored at the weekend. It seems like, to me, Buendia is a man who's, coming into his own again, and he's on that sort of that wave. But what players are you looking out for from that Villa side this weekend, Dave?
Well, you mentioned Buendia. He's got a knack of scoring goals against us. He's scored against in the past, hasn't he? So again, it seems to be the sort of same players that come up in terms of who have a knack of scoring goals against us. And we've seen that in the past with certain players. So we've got to be very wary from that perspective. But the quality on show in the Premier League, the amount of money that's spent by teams, not just the top 4 or 5, but sort of going down now into teams right down the table. It's really, really tough. It gets tougher every season, I think. And we've seen that in terms of the promoted sides struggling. I mean, that's perhaps been less so this season. Obviously, Sunderland and Leeds have had decent starts to a season, but it's not always easy to keep that momentum up across 38 games. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, we're not writing ourselves off. We know we've had a tough start, but another, a couple of back-to-back wins makes such a difference in the Premier League. So if we're able to do that we're into October now, aren't we? So looking into October and November, we can put a decent string of results together. Then it just kind of lifts you away. That takes the pressure off a little bit. But yeah, Villa will be no pushover on Sunday. We know that.
No, they won't. But you're right. Back-to-back wins would taste very good indeed. It's been quite nice, actually. I've found so far this season, in that the promoted teams have all been sort of clumped together in terms of the analysis, and the word has been, the promoted teams have had a fantastic start to the season. More relying on Sunderland and Leeds' results than ours, but I think it's painted a nice picture for us as being part of that collective. But looking at Burnley, looking at our team, we've seen in recent weeks Josh Laurent starting in that back 3, Kyle Walker playing in the right wing back slot, and it's probably allowed Laurent, I don't want to say a new lease of life, because he was obviously had a good season with us last year after signing, but it's really put him into a new place. It's put him into a new position, and he's been thriving in that position so far. In terms of our lineup for this weekend, Dave, are there any changes that you would expect to see, that you would like to see? Or do you think a similar side to the one that lined up last weekend gives us the best chance of getting a result here?
I don't foresee too many changes. It looks like Scott Parker's trying to get a settled side as much as he possibly can. I think we were a little bit taken back when Josh Laurent started playing in the back 3, but that seems to be there to stay. He's done that for a few games now. So yeah, I don't see Scott Parker making too many changes. It probably will be enforced changes if he's looking to make them now.
Yeah, I tend to agree, Dave. I think Josh Laurent's really come into his own in that position, and for me, there's no real need to make any sweeping changes. I don't think we can expect to see Mike Trezor on the bench anytime soon. So that's one dilemma. That's one dilemma solved. And in terms of the rest of the team, I think Chauner's come into the side and really impressed. We've mentioned Anthony's been fantastic recently. So yeah, I think we'll see a very similar team again. I guess the only real question mark, Dave, is whether Leslie Ugachukwu comes back into the side. Obviously had his suspension, played then against Cardiff, but was from the bench at the weekend. Do you anticipate seeing him back in the starting 11? Just because I think, to my mind, when you sort of play in PlayStation football and you've got Leslie, Cullen and Florentino Luis in your side, all of a sudden that's a really handy midfield.
Yeah, I think of the players, of the changes that potentially could be made, that's probably the one that's most likely. I don't know. They say stick with the winning team, but obviously we lost at Man City, so maybe it is a case to tinker and just have a one change in there. But I don't see there being wholesale changes. That might be the one change that he does make. But I think we've got players on the fringes who are able to step in. I mean, the disappointment to some extent was that Cardiff, they certainly didn't play together as a team, but there were some glimpses in there, weren't there, in terms of particularly second half. The first half was particularly poor, but We're going to need to have the squad contributing as the season goes on, because we know there'll be injuries, we know there'll be suspensions. So we need to make sure that we kind of keep that nucleus of the side and then bring players in as and when we need to. So I think we've we've got some options there.
Yeah, we certainly do. When I was watching the Chelsea game 2 nights ago, was it, against Benfica, and I was thinking, in another world, Florentino Luis is playing there in the Champions League for Benfica, which I think just goes to show what a coup it was, really, to sign him in the summer. So yeah, for me, I think I would use the 5-1 drubbing as a chance to tinker, let's say, and bring in Leslie into that midfield. And really start showing the fact that we've got some fantastic players in the side. So, yeah, let's give our score predictions then, Dave, before we round up. Aston Villa away, 2 p.m. on a Sunday. Villa are coming into it on a bit of refreshed form, let's say. They've sort of getting back to what they knew, but we come into the game probably desperate for points after a few opportunities went and missed lately. So, Dave, what do you think the score is going to be this weekend?
I'm going to sit on the fence and go for a 1-1 draw. I think it wouldn't be a bad thing to get a point away from home. Any point away from home is good in the Premier League. That's not to say I don't think we're capable of winning, but I think maybe the most likely is a draw. So I'm going to go for 1-1.
Yeah, I think if you offered me 1-1 now, would I take it? You know what? I'm going to have to back myself and say no, just because I know I was quite vocal in Twitter at the weekend saying, we need to get this momentum going. And I think for me, that's the important thing, is we're coming into a really good run of fixtures now, on paper. We just need to get the momentum on our side. You're looking at the likes of Leeds and Sunderland, and albeit they've had easier fixtures, I think we really need to get going now. And hopefully this is our chance to put a flag in the ground, really, and kick on. So I'm going to predict optimistically that Burnley are going to win this game 2-0. I do think Aston Villa have a soft underbelly this season. I don't think all is well, despite, a few good results recently. I do think this is a side we can get at. And even though, there's some teams who are looking better than they have in recent weeks, say like a West Ham looked improved under Nuno, there's some teams there that you're thinking are eminently catchable in some ways, or teams that you can take points off. I'm thinking of Forest under Ange, who've had another poor result tonight by the looks of it. You're looking at Villa, who obviously haven't had a good start to the season. So for me, when you come up against these teams in the moment they're struggling, you've got to take advantage, because points are few and far between in this league. So let's hope we can start this weekend with a 2-0 win as prescribed by George Poole. But Dave, thank you very much for joining me this week on the preview show / analysis. We briefly looked back at Manchester City, albeit we didn't perhaps want to, but we did. And we've looked ahead to Aston Villa this weekend. So thank you very much for all your help this week. Thank you to all the listeners for tuning in and for viewing us on YouTube. Please let us know what you think the score is going to be in the comments below if you're on YouTube, or on Twitter. You know where to find us, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Blue Sky. You can find us across all the platforms. Let us know, and please like and subscribe. It really helps. We have been toying with the idea of innovative ways to bring you content, but it all relies on the numbers going up. So please like, subscribe, and for us this week, that'll do. And we'll see you next week to hopefully reflect on a Burnley win. Wouldn't that be nice? So thanks, Dave. Thanks to the listeners. Thanks to the viewers. And goodbye.
The No Nay Never podcast is brought to you in association with the talkSPORT Fan Network. Our host and editor is Natalie Bromley, and the show is produced by Matt Moss. Our resident statistician is Dave Roberts, and our FPL expert is Adam Dennett. The Analysis Show team is collectively Tom Whittaker, Rich Steele, George Poole, Charlotte Rigby and Adam Dennett. Our music is provided by George Gaskell, and our newsletter team is headed up by Jamie Smith. If you don't already, you can subscribe to our newsletter by visiting nonaynever.substack.com. Thanks as ever go to our partners talkSPORT. We are proud to be associated with the talkSPORT Fan Network.